Hello, everybody. How we doing out there? I'm Craig. This is Spirit of Vinyl, my little channel where I waste your guys' time. How's it going out there? Happy Friday. Let's get this party started, right? Um, Drinking some of these today. Voodoo Ranger Fruit Force Fruit Punch IPA. Oh, that's pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. Oh, so hope you guys are all doing well out there. Today I'm going to kind of do a thread thing or whatever. It was, I don't know, at least a month ago or so. George over at George G's Room of Rock did a thing where he wanted to see like albums from your first 10 bands from when you were younger or whatever, the first 10 bands you got into, something like that. I don't know if it was the first album for the first 10 bands. That's kind of what I did, like trying to remember that. I did really think about this one for a while because, I've seen a couple other guys do it. Some Mark at Twanger's Turntable do it. And he was talking about how his older brothers influenced him and stuff like that. Well, I didn't have that. I am the oldest. So I didn't really have that influence. And then, when I was younger, kind of a kid or whatever, we listened to Top 40 radio. My parents weren't like super into music, but there was music in the house. My dad loved the Beach Boys and music like that. And we would listen to whatever was on the radio. Mostly my parents listened to Top 40 radio. In the late 70s, lots of disco, Saturday Night Fever and ABBA and stuff like that. And, country music, Kenny Rogers and John Denver and all that type of stuff was being played. I myself, in junior high, I would listen, I wasn't really into music. I would listen to music, and Billy Squier and Journey and Styx. When I hit junior high, I met some older kids, and that's what they were into. They were into Styx and Journey and Foreigner, and we'd hear Billy Squier and Loverboy and that type of music. But I don't really consider myself being into music until I got a little bit older. About 8th grade, I met a guy, and his name was Mike. And Mike introduced me to Kiss. So that's when I really first got into music. I got into bands, and it starts with Kiss. So I'm going to go ahead and start there. I'm going to kind of ignore a lot of that earlier stuff. I never really bought in that music until later. Yes, now I have Styx, so Loverboy and Foreigner and all that music, but I never really bought that when I was younger. But when I got introduced to Kiss, that's when I really started really getting into music and developing a style that was, not just necessarily Top 40 radio. So my first Kiss album was a gift between the summer of 8th and 9th grade. We moved from Idaho to Utah. So my going away party, my friend who introduced me to Kiss, he gave me this album at my going away dinner so I would not forget. So Kiss's Creatures of the Night was my first Kiss album that I ever owned. This is the same copy I've had since then, since 1983 is when we moved, the summer of 83. So I moved across from Idaho to Utah. It wasn't that far, but when you're 13 years old, moving 2 hours away is a long ass way away. So this is the first Kiss album I ever owned, and this is the first band I was ever really into was Kiss. So that summer, since I moved in the summer, I didn't really know anybody, moving to a new state, and I basically spent a lot of time at home listening to music, listening to Kiss, and so on, reading rock magazines, finding out other types of bands that I think might sound like them or whatever. And finally had MTV, so I was starting to see some of that 83 era, 82, 83 era. So Kiss, when I was thinking about this thread, I was thinking about what did I have in my cassette drawers back in the day. So Kiss leads to this band and that's AC/DC. This is for those about to rock. This is the first AC/DC album I ever bought, and this is the same copy I've had since then. I've had this since it came out, and I really dig this record. Not my favorite AC/DC record, but this is the first AC/DC record. So AC/DC was another band I got into. I bought this. You go to Back in Black, and you just keep going backwards. You get into the Bon Scott stuff and everything else, and become a huge fan of this band also. So I would say AC/DC is probably the second band I got into, and this is the first album I ever bought from them. All right, third band I was thinking of, seeing some videos in MTV and the style of music and everything else, and I really enjoyed that, and that would be Iron Maiden. And I'm picking Peace of Mind. I'm thinking this is the first one I got, and the reason is because this has The Trooper on it. I remember seeing the video for The Trooper, really digging that song, and getting into Iron Maiden back in that era of time, in the 83 or so era. It was before Power Slave came out, but right around the same time, 83, 84. I want to say it was Peace of Mind. Of course, I would have bought that on cassette at the time. So, but yeah, I would say Iron Maiden was probably the third band, bands I would consider my bands. So there's that. And then, of course, now by that point in time, I'm in the 9th grade, starting to meet people. The problem is when you move in the summertime, you don't really get to meet kids unless they're right in your neighborhood. So until I started school, I didn't really meet people. And when I started meeting people in school, then that type of influence, you start meeting people. And me at that point in time, being kind of socially awkward and not knowing anybody in the area, what are you into? Well, I'm really into Kiss, and AC/DC, and I liked Quiet Riot and stuff because that had came out. So start talking to other kids who have the same taste in music, and I get introduced to this man right here, Ozzy Osbourne, Diary of a Madman. This I know for sure is the first Ozzy album I ever bought. I remember this cover. It was the coolest thing ever. Of course, that would have been on cassette also at the time. Didn't really buy a whole lot of vinyl when I was young. I did and I didn't, I guess. Cassettes, portable, things you could jam in a Walkman, in your boom box and stuff like that. Records were more for the house. So when you're 13 years old and you have limited funds, you want to take your music with you everywhere. So Ozzy, Diary of a Madman, that would be another one I really got into. And then, of course, Bark at the Moon comes out after that. You go backwards. And I remember after getting Diary of a Madman going, this is really cool stuff. I ended up getting Speak of the Devil. And I'm listening to Speak of the Devil. This is great. And then I have another kid or somebody I knew says, all that music is Black Sabbath music. That Speak of the Devil album is just Ozzy doing stuff from his previous band. I was like, all right, so I guess I'll go start listening to some Black Sabbath. So I went out and got a Black Sabbath album, and I got this one right here, Black Sabbath, We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll. This was my first Black Sabbath album, and I picked it because I knew it was a greatest hits album. So, and I've had multiple copies of this, all on cassette. This is hopefully my final copy I will have to buy. But yeah, so the first thing, my first Sabbath album would have been this, and then I got into Sabbath, buying all their stuff, and the Dio era, and all of that, just going back in the catalog and picking everything up. So Black Sabbath was definitely one of my first bands, and that was for sure one of my first albums. Another band who got really big in 84 on the MTV circuit, but it was a band I was aware of because there was other videos for MTV that I really, really dug, and that would be Van Halen. And fair warning, I want to say this is probably the first Van Halen album I had. This has Unchained on it, which is a video I was talking about. If you remember back in the day, when MTV was young, not everybody was making videos, but they had this concert video of Van Halen singing Unchained. David Lee Roth is all live on stage, and basically had taken, instead of making music videos, they just cut up a concert video that had been recorded. So I remember really digging that and just really being blown away by what Eddie was doing. And picking up this album, still my favorite Van Halen album. So yeah, Van Halen, Fair Warning. Then I remember would have been October of 83. sitting at home. It's Halloween night. I'm watching MTV. My parents are gone at some work party or whatever. My brother's out trick-or-treating because he's 4 years younger than I am. I'm, of course, a sullen ninth grader who doesn't have a whole lot of friends yet because I've only been in school for a month and a half or so. You got to think school starts in August sometime, September. Back then, it didn't start until September, like after Labor Day or whatever, right? Is it Labor Day? Yes, Labor Day. So I'd only been in school for 6 weeks or whatever, and I remember, so I wasn't out with my friends on Halloween. I was in the ninth grade. I'm staying home. I'm handing out candy. I'm watching MTV. They're doing Halloween videos, and I see this band and this hard-driving riff that starts, and there's this band, and they're wearing makeup, and they sound badass. They look awesome. The video for Looks to Kill was killer, and I was hooked from that point on, and this is Shout of the Devil. And this, I know for a fact, was the first Motley Crue album I ever bought. I don't know what happened to my original copy. I had it forever. This is a repress, but I remember when I first bought my original copy, went to the mall with my parents. I'm like, I'm going to go to the record store and buy a record, and I come back with this. And my parents are freaking out because of the pentagram on here. And then, you know, once it's opened and they see the picture on the inside of these guys and everything else, so I was hooked on these guys. Motley Crue's Shout of the Devil. There we go. Another one of the first bands I was into. Of course, in that era, also another band that when I first saw the video for that I really, really dug and I really got into early was Queensryche. And this album is The Warning. And I remember seeing the video for Take Hold of the Flame. And that's what got me on to Queensryche early in the day. So Queensryche, and honestly, this album and Mindcrime and Rage for Order and stuff, and I'm not like a huge Queensryche fan, but I do love that, you know, this and the EP, and of course, Mindcrime is probably one of the greatest concept albums of all time. Rage for Order is a great album. I kind of fall off after that, but back then, first bands you're being into is what we're talking about today. So Queensryche, The Warning would definitely have been one of those bands. So, and another one, of course, this is the MTV era. So, when you see a video you really dig and you thought was awesome, you started listening to them, you started doing all that, and Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It comes on MTV. These guys, Twisted Sister, the look, the attitude, the sound, I was immediately hooked onto this, got Stay Hungry, went and got Under the Blade and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, and I was all in on these guys for like 2 years, of course, you know. And then, you know, we all know like how Twisted kind of fell off, but this is a great record. I want to say probably You Can't Stop Rock and Roll is my favorite Twisted Sister album, but this is the first one I ever bought. And there we go. One of their band I was really into. I saw them twice in like 3 months. I saw them on this tour. First, I saw them on this tour. It was in like 84 with Y&T and Dawkins as the opening act, and these guys were headlining. And then I saw them like 3 months later when they were opening for Iron Maiden on the Power Slave tour. So, and that's the only 2 times I saw Twisted Sister. I saw Dee Snider later as a solo artist in the early 90s. But yeah. All right, and final, because he was asking for 10, here's the last one. Same thing, MTV turns me on. I become hooked. Rats Out of the Cellar. The video for Round and Round comes out. They got a cool look. They got a cool sound. That hook on Round and Round. Great chorus and everything else. Just tremendous stuff right here. So Rat Out of the Cellar, buying this as soon as I could. As soon as I saw that video, I'm like, okay, that's a band I got to get into. I got this. I bought the EP. And Rat is from that era of music, that style of 80s metal. Rat is probably my favorite band. Over Motley Crue, over Twisted Sister, over all the other 80s metal style bands, Rat is my favorite of that era, honestly. So, all right, so there we go. 10 albums from my first 10 bands for George at George G's Room of Rock. Like I said, I could have went even younger, you know, but some of the stuff I was into, I wasn't really into. It just stuff older kids were listening to, you know, and yeah, you enjoy Journey, you enjoy Styx, and you think songs like Blue Collar Man and Too Much Time on My Hands are just great songs, but I didn't buy any of that music at the time. I've bought it more recently and like filled up my collection, but back then I wasn't buying that music. So, and you know, didn't get into the thrash or anything else because that came a little bit later, honestly. If you're talking about early stuff, thrash doesn't hit me until 85 or 86. So by then, I'm already into all kinds of other stuff. So that's why we didn't get Metallica or Megadeth or anything else just because of my age. This is stuff that happened when I was anywhere between 12 and 14 years old when I really was getting into music. So, all right, thanks again for watching. Hope you guys all had a great weekend. Hope you guys out there in Buffalo are having a blast. If you're watching this or if you catch this later, I hope you guys in Buffalo had a blast. Get yourself some Juicy Force and Fruit Force, sorry, not Juicy Force. And have a great weekend, y'all. Really appreciate y'all stopping by. And we'll talk to you all later.